Hello there, you're watching the press preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. And it's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mail's consultant editor Andrew Pearce and the broadcaster and former MP Anna Soubry. So very good evening to both of you. So let's take a look then at what's making the front pages first of all, with still a few to come in, but here's what we've got so far. The Eye reports that on a record-setting day, with more than 100,000 new COVID cases, new research emerged appearing to show the risk of hospitalisation from Omicron is lower than from previous variants. Indeed, the Telegraph suggests that Omicron patients are two-thirds less likely to end up in hospital, which is prompting some ministers to insist that new restrictions aren't necessary. Though The Guardian puts that lower risk figure at 40%, while the Mail cites a study claiming the number is 50%. And the Financial Times carries warnings from energy companies of stratospheric wholesale price increases in the new year, which they say could lead to a national crisis. So Andrew Pearce and Anna Soubry here to go through those front pages with us. Still more to come in, of course, but the main theme of most of the headlines we've got so far is this new data that's come out, this real-world data that we've got, Andrew. You picked out the Eye, first of all. Omicron is lower risk than Delta cases. That's the finding. But as the Eye points out, cases are hitting new records.
Yeah, look, normally the fact that cases have gone above 100,000 for the first time would be a real jolt. It would really worry people and depress people. But it's offset by this really, really encouraging news that's coming out from research in Scotland, which shows that the Omicron variant is much less dangerous to the public health than the Delta variant. So, in fact, two-thirds less likely to be hospitalised. They've been analysing the figures. Admittedly, there are no very old people involved or people with underlying health issues, but normally they would have expected at this stage 47, 48, 49 people to be in hospital. It's only 15. So this is still very early stages, but there's also information coming out of South Africa where this wretched variant began, also suggesting that hospitalizations there are fewer of them and that people are going to become less sick, which is really, really encouraging because, by God, don't we need to be cheered up because Christmas has been uncertain, New Year has been uncertain, and this will cheer people no end. We mustn't jump to too many conclusions, but it's a very good sign and it's pointing in the right direction.
Well, yes, so some good news on the front pages, Anna Soubry, but the other part of that Eye headline is still concerning, isn't it? Cases hit new record. And the fact is that we also know that Omicron is more transmissible as well than other variants, and that may wipe out the gains, if you like, that we've got from the lower risk of hospitalisation.
Yes, absolutely. And, we can't take anything for granted. But this is, frankly, the sort of news that we all would welcome going up to Christmas because it is so grim. The figures are obviously at a record high. So I think the caution I would put into it is not losing sight of the fact that the vaccine programme, the booster programme, as it will continue. But I think it's critical now that the government makes every effort to get those people who have not been vaccinated, and there's still a significant number of people. I mean, in the city of Nottingham, it's somewhere around 40% of people who haven't had both jabs, but there are people, of course, who haven't even had one. So there's a big piece of work to do there. In addition, obviously, to keep on ruling out the booster programme. And I still think that we all have to be cautious because what we mustn't take our eye off is that if you get it, there's a good chance you'll be bedridden. And of course, because of the now 7-day requirement to self-isolate, that's having a huge knock-on effect on businesses, on public services, and of course the NHS, putting huge strains at a stressful time in terms of people going into hospital and getting poorly on the staff there and its ability to cope. So I still think we've all got to be sensible.
Well, yes, and the Daily Telegraph also picks up these studies. As you pointed out, Andrew, there are a few of them. They go with the headline, Omicron hospital risk is 2/3 lower. But their subheading there says, ministers say tougher restrictions can't be justified, basically as a result of these studies. I mean, we've heard from the other nations, we've heard from Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland saying that after Christmas there will be some restrictions on behaviour. We've not heard a verdict yet as far as England is concerned. Do we have enough information now, do you think?
Well, look, there was a cabinet meeting which lasted 3 hours earlier this week, as we know, and 8 or 9 ministers spoke out against the idea of any more additional restrictions. Because in a sense, Plan B has effectively achieved a form of lockdown already by stealth, because Chris Whitty, the chief medical officer, spoke differently to Boris Johnson at the briefing earlier this week. And if you look at most town centres and city centres, they're pretty deserted. High streets are pretty deserted. Public transport is pretty thin and empty. So in a sense, Chris Whitty got his way, really, because we've gone into a form of lockdown without actually saying we're going into lockdown, which is why a lot of ministers and Tory MPs are saying that's enough now, because we've already shut down large parts of the economy. It's why the Chancellor's had to bring forward money for the hospitality industry, because it's been so badly affected at its most critical period in the whole year.
Do you think that's right, Anna? I mean, we've heard from Wales's First Minister today when he introduced some new measures for Wales, including bringing back the rule of 6 from Boxing Day, for example. He's accused Boris Johnson's government of paralysis when making decisions over England. Do you think that's fair,
that's
him
right.
saying that?
Yeah, I do think it's fair. Because and he gives advice. Now, I think what's happened is because of this breakdown of trust with our Prime Minister, because he's found out to not be, how do we put it, socially distanced from the truth is a feature of his premiership. And people have lost trust and faith in Boris Johnson. And so they're turning to people that they do trust, because unfortunately the government does have a history of always being behind the curve, acting too late. And that's why people themselves, I agree with Andrew, people themselves have said, well, actually, I'm more inclined to believe Chris Whitty, and I'm just going to take things nice and easy. And you only have to look at your own life. I mean, I don't live in London. I've got 2 daughters that do, both of whom have got COVID. It seems that half of London's got COVID. I think these figures, by the way, will also be well behind the actual real figures relating to the number of people who are infected.
Andrew, I noticed you were shaking your head when Anna was first answering there.
I don't agree with Mark Drakeford, the Welsh First Minister, about the government being in paralysis. I think actually the Prime Minister has just listened to his parliamentary party and his ministers for a change. He had not been listening at all. And I think it's quite good that that's happening. But also, I want to say about London, the reason we've got a real problem in London, which is the petri dish, frankly, of the United Kingdom for this variant, is because so many people in London are not vaccinated. Around 10% haven't had one vaccination, let alone a booster. And Anna Soubry talked earlier about how we've got to persuade these people. Yeah, but how? Because this booster program's, this jab program's been running for months and months and months. They're stubbornly refusing to do it. Now, I'm not one of those who thinks you've got to compel them, but you do despair sometimes that we're never going to get sorted with this variant if so many people continue to refuse to have the jab because they believe all this conspiracy rubbish on the internet.
And very quickly, let's just show The Guardian.
We agree on that.
OK, sorry, The Guardian's front page, again with the new data. Their subhead there, warnings that NHS may still be overwhelmed as daily cases hit 106,000. So a different tone to The Telegraph. But do you want to see more restrictions, or do you agree with Andrew that how people are regulating their own behaviour already? What's your take on it?
Well, I think that's exactly right. People are regulating their own behaviour. But can I just say, it's good that we do agree about the need to get people who are unvaccinated vaccinated. And I did quite a lot of obviously not actual jabbing, but volunteering, especially through the summer. And I've seen doctors and I've seen nurses and the way that they speak to people. And I've known from GP practices that they can really get into their communities. And there are very clever, subtle, sensible ways that they have proper conversations with people who have otherwise taken this decision not to get vaccinated, and they can be persuaded. And of course, one of the biggest persuasions of all of that is the fact that the majority of people in hospital with COVID, on ventilators, in intensive care, are people who have not been vaccinated.
And on the question of restrictions, Anna?
No, I think we're about right, but I think that we have to see where the figures go. And I have to say, I can foresee that on Boxing Day or thereafter, there is a chance that the government may have, in England, to introduce some sort of measures.
OK, well, that will
but
have
the people are doing it. People are doing it.
OK, yeah, and there is more information expected,
and that's
isn't there?
right, you know. Don't you think that's right? I mean, we're big enough and ugly enough to make our own decisions now. We've been living with this wretched thing for best part of, what is it, 2 years?
Yeah, we're listening to Chris Whitty.
but people just make. I just think people are sensible, Anna, and they know they don't need nanny state governments keep telling us you can do this and you can't do that. I mean, it's ridiculous what's in some of these countries. Scotland is saying that football matches have to stop on Boxing Day, and yet they allowed a full programme of football matches in the Scottish Premier League tonight. Where's the logic in that?
Yeah, but you always find these illogicalities about when you put in a restriction on a certain date, or when you stop people flying in or flying out. But I think actually people are working it out for themselves. And it is absolutely striking. As I say, I don't live in London, but I was in Lincoln today. And it was really noticeable that there's a lot less people there. And it's not just Lincoln, it's throughout the whole of the East Midlands, and no doubt throughout the whole of the country. And that's because people are not stupid. But most importantly, they have listened to people like Chris Whitty. And of course, you know, we've God knows, we've been at this now for nearly 2 years. And the reason, can I just say that people didn't do as the government said. They obeyed the lockdown because they understood why they needed to, and they agreed with it, because if they didn't agree with it, we wouldn't have abided by the rules in the amazing way that millions and millions of people did. Just a pity that so many people in number 10 Downing Street also didn't follow the rules.
OK, and let's just move on. I mean, we may well hear more in the next couple of days as far as post-Christmas restrictions for England, but we'll have to wait and see. Let's have a quick look at what's inside the FT. There's a column here from Bronwyn Maddox. Andrew, what's this about?
Well, she's from the Institute of Government, and she used to write for the FT many years ago, and she was a former colleague of mine from the Times, and she's written a really thoughtful piece about experts. And of course, she's talking about Chris Whitty, of course, who's become almost, well, he's a household name now, isn't he? About how Boris Johnson, at the beginning of this pandemic, we were following the advice of science, and then we're not always following the advice of science. And it's all about really the position of advisors. And she was pretty cross with the Tory MP, I've forgotten her name, Anna might remember.
Joy Morrissey.
Joy Morrissey, who really flew at Chris Whitty for speaking differently to the Prime Minister at that Downing Street briefing the other day. She went for him in a tweet saying, how dare an unelected official effectively to close the country down.
She quite quickly deleted that tweet.
She withdrew it. Yeah, but the tweet was out there. But I think she spoke for quite a lot of people in the Tory party, certainly, who thought, actually, it's the Prime Minister should lead on this because he's the elected official. But the elected Prime Minister, Chris Whitty's an unelected official, but he is the Chief Medical Officer.
Chris Whitty's getting a lot of mentions in this press preview. I'm just going to leave us this section with the Mac cartoon, always worth visiting, isn't it, Anna? On the front of the Telegraph. I don't know if you can see it. I'll read it out there for our
brilliant.
viewers.
I'm hoping Christmas with my husband's family will be like the Omicron variant, not as bad as we all feared. I mean, thank God for Matt, because he cheers us up. Because you don't have to buy the paper in order to see that cartoon, because of course on the internet and obviously on programs like this we always get these previews, but he just seems to nail it every time, and it brings a much needed smile to everybody's faces because it's pretty darned grim.
Absolutely. Well, on that smiley note, we will pause and take a break, but plenty more coming up in just a moment, including how might the next chapter of the Brexit saga play out if the DUP gets its way. We're going to be talking about that in a moment. welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me tonight, Andrew Pearce and Anna Soubry. And we're going to move from talking about COVID to talking about Brexit, which we probably haven't done for a while. Anna, the front page of The Telegraph has the headline, DUP will urge Truss to invoke Article 16. So what are they saying?
So this is, look, Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary, has now taken on the role of being the Brexit negotiator, because if you thought Brexit was done, clearly hasn't been done, because there's this continuing row about the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, the Northern Ireland Protocol actually works very well for the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland, but the DUP take great exception to it, because in effect what it's done is create a border in the Irish Sea because of the absolute desire not to have that hard border between the Republic of Ireland and between the North and Northern Ireland. And so the DUP, facing elections in May, has been stirring up, in my opinion, quite a lot of trouble in the unionist community against this. And I think what this is really going to be is a test of whether or not Liz Truss is going to side on, if you like, the right of the hard right of the Conservative Party, or whether she's going to, and therefore with the DUP, or whether she's going to take a more pragmatic view of the protocol. But if she does that, then it's argued that she'll probably scupper her chances of becoming the next leader of the Conservative Party.
Andrew, is that how you see it?
So it's going to be interesting.
Well, I mean, this is all about the DUP thinking they could lose the elections to Stormont next year. The Sinn Féin could actually become the largest party. So they want Liz Truss to trigger Article 16 because that will show that they're standing up to the EU. It's known as the nuclear option. Now, I don't know what she's going to do. I think Lord Frost, who was doing that job, wanted to trigger Article 16, but was being restrained. I don't know who by. So it will be a big test. And Anna Soubry's right in one respect. A lot of people on the Brexit side of the Tory party will expect her to go in there all guns blazing, doing a Mrs. Thatcher, if you like, swinging her handbag. It'll be a big test for her. She proves she's an able negotiator by doing quite a lot of trade deals in her previous role as International Trade Secretary. But this is going to be a big one.
OK, one to watch then, definitely. We've only got about 20 seconds, so I think I've only got time to show everyone the photograph on the front of The Guardian. Maybe we can talk about it in the next hour, but it's basically people gathering at Stonehenge to mark the winter solstice, and it looked like a really beautiful morning this morning. Anyway, that will be something that perhaps we'll come back to, but days are getting lighter, yay!